There's like 5 things. Hi, everybody.
Hello. Welcome, everyone.
Welcome to, wait, where are we?
Oh yeah, okay, wait, we have to decide, do we say Somos first or summer fun first?
Hello. You decide.
So let's say Somos first and then summer, okay?
All right, are you ready?
All right, I'm ready.
Welcome to Somos Summer Fun Club!
Summer Fun Club! I thought I was gonna totally mess it up again. Hello and welcome everyone. And in true Fun Club tradition, we started with just a few little hiccups. Of course, I was updating my computer this morning and someone interrupted the process. So I am like logged into a different computer, which has, let's see if we can find it. It has a black dot on the camera, which you can't get rid of. And so it reminded me of Robin Hood Men in Tights with the mole that moves around. So I'm going to try to just keep that on the dock. And so it won't be distracting. And it doesn't really matter anyway, because today is all about Alicia.
Well, it's not all about me. It's all about how we manage to fit our beliefs in with our expectations. And also, probably because it's me that's talking, we're going to talk a little bit about beliefs. So just a quick note, I'm Alicia. I'm the director of training for the Comprehensible Classroom. And I am here with, hang on.
Oh, I'm fixing. Oh, and I'm Martina Bex. And I was just messing around with my internet too. So I was temporarily distracted. Wow.
Isn't teaching online so much fun, Martina? And as usual, the Facebook feed is not allowing both of us to be seen. So we recognize it's kind of hard to have a conversation. So like, bear with us, and Martina's just not going to talk. I don't know. I'm kidding. Sometimes, as you know from teaching online all year, it just doesn't do what you want to do no matter what you're trying. So just a quick reminder, our norms are: be kind to presenters and other viewers and commenters. Be nice to me, please. It's been a rough week, man.
I'll try really hard.
Thank you. Please refrain from blame and shame in the comments with regard to anything. Don't blame yourself. Don't blame other people. Don't shame yourself. Don't shame other people. Don't blame me for having a dog with a squeaky toy. I'm really sorry about that, friends. Be willing to try.
And let's also, I want to say with that one too, with colleagues, just be careful, because remember, this is a private group and we are going to be talking about working with colleagues and how sometimes that can be hard. This is a private group, but it still is on Facebook. And we just want to make sure that no one ever says something in our group that ends up coming back to biting them. So, as you're talking about your colleagues, just be careful and semi-professional about what you might say.
Absolutely. Be willing to try on some new ideas. Hopefully you'll get some new ideas, some new thoughts. Try it on, see how it feels. This is important. Please ask questions that are related to the topic of the session today. The topic is being true to yourself while dealing with colleagues who may not believe the same thing. Specifically, we're going to focus on teaching in a very grammar-centric traditional paradigm and what that might look like, and help each other to find answers to those questions.
Woohoo.
Are you ready? Give me a thumbs up or a like, or let me know in the comments that you are here and you are listening. Woohoo! All right. Sweet.
Yeah, it's a little tricky because Facebook did that update where they changed the way they work with Zoom, and now you have to like refresh. So I'll try to be doing that for you, Alicia, so that
Thanks, Anna Marie. Thanks, Agnes. Thanks, everybody. I see you and I feel I'm feeling the love. So I want to start with a foundational idea. How about this? As teachers, we deserve to teach in a way that is effective and meaningful. Just take a minute.
Go clap.
This is from Angela Watson from an interview that she did. We'll link to it at the end. Is this amazing or what? You guys, this is really important. We deserve to teach in a way that is effective and meaningful. And that also means not just for the students, but meaningful to us. We have that right. And I think that's really important. Okay, so that's one of my foundational ideas. When approaching this work as a grammar teacher, which I'll give you a little context here in a few minutes, I'm starting from here. I deserve to teach in a way that's effective and meaningful, and students deserve to be learning in a way that I know to be effective. I know this because I've really looked at the facts. I've really looked at the facts about language acquisition. I've looked at the research. I've processed the research. I've done action research. I've gone to conferences. I've read some books. I've spent a lot of time processing and practicing and learning with colleagues. I've looked at my beliefs about language acquisition, and I've accepted that the beliefs that I started with about language and what a teacher should do in a language class are actually pretty different than the facts about how students acquire languages. Oh, wow, now you can see both of us. How cool is that? I don't know what you did, Martina, but remember it.
I changed my view.
Sweet, you guys, look, it's both of us now.
Yes.
So Dr. Bill Van Patten shared this in a really impactful conversation last week at the CI Reboot Conference. That video is actually available for streaming on the IFLT CI page and for free. It's incredible. And this has really resonated with me. A lot of teachers, and by goodness, Martina, I know that this is where you started. This is definitely where I started. I didn't know the facts at all about language acquisition. I was just surfing on my beliefs about what I thought it meant to be a language teacher and how I thought students learned. And as a teacher, it's my responsibility to educate myself. Now that I've educated myself, oh my goodness, what happens when I am being asked to do things that do not meaningfully or effectively serve the students? So if we go back here, if they're learning in a way that if I'm expected to teach in a way that is ineffective, that's a problem. That's a problem. And so one of the facts is that explicit instruction does not lead to language acquisition. That's a fact. And that's something we talk about a lot over here in our Somos group. We don't learn language by learning about the grammar of the language. We learn language by communicating.
Yeah, Alicia, I think that most of my education as an educator, so my education program in college was focused on general teaching. And then I only had one course that was specifically related to teaching language, and it was a methods course. But I never took a course in language acquisition, and the methods textbook was focused on all of these different ways that, throughout history that have been kind of trends in language teaching, but it never went back to what was the theory that they were in line with. So like you, it has taken a lot of me researching on my own after I started teaching to learn what are the facts about language acquisition, and then using that as the filter to look at my methodology, rather than just picking a methodology that seemed to me like it was fun or, something that resonated with my personality.
Ooh, that's really interesting that you said that, because fun is really important. And also, just because it's fun doesn't mean it's effective. And I think that's so interesting, because I certainly thought that if the students were having fun, I was doing a good job. And I certainly thought that if the students were having fun playing games, then language acquisition was happening. And it turns out that that is not always the case. That was a harsh piece of learning for me.
Yeah.
So I want to share with you guys a little bit about about what I was actually doing in my classes. So a few weeks ago, I taught in a summer immersion camp for adults, and I signed a contract as grammar teacher. Which, if you know me, you might find that is a little bit hilarious, right? So here I am as a grammar teacher. And I'll talk a little bit more about the expectations, but I took a look at the expectations and I had a little bit of a panic attack. I got so stressed and I had to decide. I had to pick a path because I want to know the facts and I want to teach from fact-based teaching, evidence-based teaching, right? I don't want to teach based on beliefs. So I had to choose. Do I take a stand? Do I tell them that what they are doing is wrong? How many of you have done that? Guess what? It rarely goes well. Do I choose to be quietly subversive? Or do I go with the flow? Now, this was the first time I was invited to teach with this organization. It's a community college. Friends of mine invited me in. That's how I kind of got the opportunity to interview. That's where I got the recommendation from. So maybe taking a stand and telling them that I think that they are not serving the students is a really terrible idea on so many levels. It's unprofessional. Often, not always. There are absolutely things we need to take stands on.
Especially because you signed up to be a grammar teacher. So then telling them after you've signed the contract, that would be pretty problematic.
Right? Like, oh, well, I think that you should change the title. And even though I accepted it, no, that just didn't feel right to me. And going with the flow, not only didn't feel right, but what they were asking me to do was ludicrous. Like, it was really not based in reality. There's no way I could have done what they asked me to do, which I'm sure everyone watching recognizes, like, can empathize with this feeling of you are given this thing that is actually impossible to do, right?
Yeah, you posted pictures of the syllabus that you were given on your blog. And so you had a week with these students. It was a week. Oh, there you go. A week of how many hours per day?
Well, it was supposed to be 10 hours or more, maybe in a regular, because face-to-face, 12 hours maybe over a week. But because of COVID, it was virtual and it was cut down to 8 hours total. And that's with breaks.
And those are all the grammar points that you're supposed to
all
help
the grammar points.
master.
So here's just an example. I was supposed to teach reflexive verbs, stem changing verbs, preterite imperfect, ser, star, irregular present tense verbs, present progressive, weather expressions, saber, conocer. So that's to be and to know in different ways, professions, different uses of the preterite, and a whole lot of other things beside. Here's the list. I was also CC'd on an email invite to my students saying, Alicia will be teaching the syllabus. Can you imagine? I know, right, Kimberly? That is absolutely ludicrous. Oh, and then I was given a split class. So I had a level 4 and a level 5. Those are not like high school levels. This was their designation, sort of intermediate low and intermediate mid, but not really. So, right? So I looked at that and I looked at my facts about language acquisition. And the fact is that I want to use the language with the students. Anybody can watch a video about the differences, about how to conjugate reflexive verbs, and they can watch a video and it might feel good, but it probably isn't going to lead to actually being able to use those, certainly not immediately, and probably not at all. Those are the facts, friends. I'm not going to go into that. We actually have some fun clubs that deal with that. We have lots of stuff that deals with that. But the reality is that is not going to help meet the students' goals. The students want to use Spanish. They want to be able to communicate. They want to be able to understand. This is not going to help them understand. But I know what will, because I know how language acquisition works. So I chose the path of quiet subversion.
The path of medium resistance.
The path of medium resistance. I told them what I was going to do. like I came up with a plan, and I'll talk about how I came up with a plan. But before I go any further, Martina, do you have any questions or wonderings about what I've talked about so far? Do any of you
No,
all-
I would like to just recap for anybody that might be jumping in now. So it was it last week or 2 weeks ago? This summer is crazy. So 2 weeks ago, Alicia was a grammar teacher in a community college immersion program for adults. She was hired as a grammar teacher. And so she was faced with the choice of, do I take a stand about when she saw the syllabus, do I take a stand and tell them that this syllabus is bananas? It has nothing to do with language acquisition. Do I choose to be quietly subversive and try to find a way to do what I know to be best practice and still meet the program goals, or just go with the flow and do what they hired me to do in the way that they were imagining that I would do it? And Alicia chose numero dos.
I chose quiet subversion, but I also want to say, and I see somebody saying it's hard when you're the middle school teacher, when you don't have any social cachet, when you don't have any status. And I hear that. Yeah. I had never taught with this organization before. They didn't know who I was. I was brought in on a recommendation. You know, all the advanced teachers are very grammar heavy. The beginner teachers who were teaching this year were very grammar heavy. The things that we were invited to do in our group trainings really didn't fit with my understanding of language acquisition. Aside from a handful of colleagues, I felt very much like the odd duck out, and it was terrifying. It was really hard, and I had to decide how I was going to do this. So I looked at this bananas piece
Banana.
and I thought,
So
well,
crazy.
what do I, if my enduring understandings are, well, what are my enduring understandings from this, right? I can't obviously do all of this. I have to be picky, because this is unreasonable. This is unreasonable in a year, honestly. So my enduring understandings, well, I know that students want to know they want to use the language, and I want to give them the ability to use the language. So I started with, what are the words from the Super 7, this is from Dr. Terry Waltz, that can be used to talk about anything? So, and Dr. Waltz has posited that these verbs in any language having to do with these 7 ideas to describe these 7 things, you can use them like anybody can use them. And these do happen to make up the highest frequency lists in most languages. So location, existence, possession, identity, preference, motion, and volition.
Yeah. So in Spanish, we're looking at estar, ser, possession is tener, identity, ser again, preference, querer or gustar, motion, ir, volition,
Querer o prefier.
Yep.
Preferer. So I know if I'm focusing on these, I'm going to be good. I'm going to be helping meet the students' goals to use the language, to gain to be able to communicate. I also know that I wasn't teaching brand new novices, which means I could make sure that they knew these words, but they had a base of these words, so I could also expand on that. But we're still going to focus on these, because these are really important words.
Alicia, I want to park on that just for a moment, because I think one thing that I notice is that, and it totally makes sense, but when we have so ingrained in us like a grammar and vocabulary syllabus, and then we see, focus on the Super 7 words, I noticed that then we kind of translate our goals from before we were acquisition focused teachers to this. So teachers might think, if I just teach my students these 7 verbs, then they'll be good to go. So what do you mean when you say like focus on them, or, get your students to know them? Like what does that mean?
So to me, that means that we are going to use them in context. We're going to read, we're going to talk, we're going to listen, we're going to understand, and most importantly, they're going to understand when I use these words. And it's really about using them to communicate, not conjugate. Because it turns out that if I walk into a country and I start conjugating a verb, that's not communication.
So your goal is more interpretation. So what would you be going for, a quote unquote mastery of these verbs, or what would that look like? Because I think that's another kind of stumbling block, this idea of mastery.
So I haven't mastered the English language. I'm a very great speaker of English. I'm well read. I certainly haven't mastered Spanish. Mastery is a tricky word anyway. I'm hoping that they understand at their level, and at some point, and it may not be in our time together, but at some point they will be able to use them. Now, if somebody says, I likes blue, rather than I like blue, the color blue, are they communicating? Absolutely. Is it mastery? No. Well, my goodness, that third person, or that third person S for verbs is really tricky in English. Yeah. So did I understand what they mean? Totally. If a kid says, me gusta gatos, I like singular cats, plural cats, gosh, I still understand what they mean. It's not that big of a deal. So I think
your hope is that by using these words a lot in class, and maybe simplifying bigger ideas or sheltering vocabulary, so that instead of using a different word, you use one of these words, that your students will be comfortable interpreting. They'll be able to recognize that word when they hear it and understand what it means.
Absolutely. The other thing I want to point out is that these were intermediate learners, supposedly. But I couldn't assume that they knew all of these. And there is often teachers of higher levels, and I felt like this was more of a higher level class. It wasn't a beginner class by any stretch. Many of the higher level teachers think that maybe now is the time to start injecting grammar. I don't believe that. I don't think we need to teach grammar at intermediate levels or even necessarily advanced levels if we want students to be communicated. If our goal is to learn the grammar, that's different, but that is different than a communication goal. And I want communication. I want expression and interpretation of meaning for a purpose. So I also know that if I am speaking naturally, I am going to be using past tense words. I'm going to be using the preterite and the imperfect. I am going to be using present tense. I'm going to be talking about what people are doing. Now, I might have to intentionally plan some lessons to make sure I'm using that language, and I'll talk about that. And I'm going to be talking about the future, because the future is interesting. What's tomorrow going to be like? What are you all doing tonight? Right? If we're conversing, and there are ways that we can include all of those pieces. So
what I'm noticing then is that because that grammar syllabus that they had such a crazy broad range of verb tenses on it that you were expected to cover, you kind of took the approach of, let me limit the set of vocabulary, like the number of verbs that I'm using with it. So these are verbs that the students are pretty comfortable with. I'm going to talk about these things, but use all of these different tenses so that I can kind of check off those boxes on the syllabus.
Exactly. And those enduring understandings are the words that the most high frequency words, the words that they're going to need to communicate. So I took this list as well, and I started thinking, like, what resources do I have access to, and what activities that can get present progressive, whether irregular present tense. Well, gosh, all of those super 7 verbs are irregular or stem changing. How can I get the preterite and imperfect in there? How can I talk about professions? I went to the Somos curriculum map and I just started skimming it and like, okay, y'all, yeah, I know the Somos pretty darn well, maybe not as well as Martina, but I know it pretty well. And I knew that Unit 21, which is a free download, has, oh my gosh, reflexive and stem changing,
Wow.
time markers, and irregular yo form verbs. Gosh, if so, that's like half of that right here, right?
Yeah.
So all I
And
really
it's camping, so weather.
right, it's camp weather, and there's some other things I can do. And then if we're, if we're telling any story, it's impossible to not to use the word to be. It just is. And they're going camping. There we are, present progressive. So we're going to talk about what they're doing. So once I came up with that, I took my highlighter, and I'll show you a blow up of this, but I took my highlighter and I started highlighting everything in the syllabus that I was going to touch, that we were going to use these words. Look at that, you guys.
That's awesome.
And then, so here's a little, so reflexive verbs and pronouns are the thing that I'm going to do on day 4. Well, I actually don't want to wait till day 4 to do them. We're going to start using them on our first day together, and we're going to do that through a story. We're going to do that through a picture talk, and we're going to do that through personalized questions and answers. Now, if you're not familiar with these things, Somos has got you covered. We'll link to lots of articles at the end. Don't get hung up on the nomenclature. I just want you guys to sort of think along with me about how I'm doing it. We're going to review these things. Well, we're going to use personalized questions and answers, use some stories, do some reading, do a picture talk. And then we're supposed to move into the imperfecto, which is part of the past tense. And I'm going to ask them what they did last night. How were you feeling? What were you doing? And we're going to include that in the story.
So you were kind of looking at, you highlighted it to see like what could you hit with this unit. And then you went back specifically and you kind of thought like what's already written into that unit, like what activities can I use to do these things? And then what are some maybe additional things that might fit in? So like the chit chat isn't necessarily written into that unit, but that would be an easy thing that you can bring in, thinking about your context as like, you're going to be teaching humans that are living lives between each time you see them.
Right. And I can invite them to tell me, what are you going to do after class?
Mm-hmm.
What did you do over the weekend? It just turns out that somebody in the class totally serendipitously had gone camping. So I had some pictures of camping. And so, and this is interesting because in order to work in this past tense, preterite, and imperfect, I did have to get a little bit crafty. And so not just asking things like, what time did you wake up this morning? What time did you go to sleep last night? I also chose in our story to go back in time in our story. So things were happening. Our main character discovered something that happened before.
Okay.
And so we were just like we talk in stories. Right now I'm speaking in the present tense and in the past tense, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to point out. The TPRS, the teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, that's a part of just about every unit in the curriculum. And it's one of those ones that a lot of teachers are not excited about, and it's hard to learn. And we've done a lot of videos about how to story ask and what to do instead of story asking for that reason. But one of the beautiful things about having a script is that you can change it, like more than just when you're creating the story with your class, like filling in the details. That's what how the script is intended to be used. And also you can change the script any way you want to meet any kind of programmatic need or any need in your classroom. So in this case, you really had a specific need to be working with present tense, and then also like with multiple timeframes. So then also that past tense. So you looked at the script and thought, how can I modify this a little bit so that there's a portion of the story that is like a flashback or referencing something that happened in the past.
Absolutely. And it wasn't like that was one and done. When I typed up the script, when I typed up the story that we created, I typed it up in the past tense, as if I was narrating a story in the past. Then we played a little game called Before and After. What happened immediately before? What happened immediately after? So they're hearing that preterite or imperfect. Oh, and emotions. How did they feel when that thing happened? So they're getting a mix of preterite and imperfect.
So you were really intentional about the activities that you chose to review the story as well, to really think about what activities can I choose that aren't just retelling it, but that are looking at the story and talking about it as something that happened.
Exactly. Now, the other piece that I think is worth saying is that this is just the tiny little snapshot of what I did during the week. I did other stuff too. None of it included a lesson on the preterite, the differences between the preterite and imperfect. For the picture talk, to get in that progressive, I asked, what is he doing? I had these pictures of an adorable hedgehog going camping that I found somewhere on the magical internet. It's like on an Instagram account, super cute.
So
and I asked, what is he doing? And we talked, oh, he is doing this. He is running. He is rowing. He is, what is he going to do next? What just happened before he was in the middle of the lake? And then we had to talk about, did he get in the boat? Did he fall in the water? Was he swimming? Right? And we're getting all of
swim.
Right? We had all of this amazingly rich language. And, you know, people are often concerned that older students, high school students aren't going to get into this. I can tell you that adults got as into it as any sixth grade class I've ever taught.
I remember
so stoked.
I think I talked to you on the phone right after you taught that lesson, and you were like, oh my gosh, they loved the story so much. And it's so true. I think that, you know, we all have this imagination that kind of lies dormant a lot of times as grown-ups. And it's so fun to come back to that. Alicia, one question that I think probably some folks have is, so you're talking about how you were given this grammar syllabus, and I apologize if you were going to talk about this already. You're given this grammar syllabus, and then you're focused on using these words. Did the students ever have to take a test at the end, or like, what was the expected outcome? Did they have to show some level of something at the end, and how are you addressing that, if so?
That's a great question. And so there was no formal assessment at the end, but there is something more powerful. Student perceptions, student reviews, student comments on the class in a survey. And those are very much determined because unlike a school, these were paying customers.
Yeah.
Right. So if they were not happy, this was going to be a big problem. And that is a really important piece. I did actually give them two assessments, two formal assessments, because I wanted to. I had them do a pre-write before on the first day of class and a writing on the last day of class.
Okay.
And I invited them to share that with me. Only one person did. But I wanted to make visible their comfort and confidence with the language. And I've done that a few times with adult classes. I do it with my student classes. I've done it as a learner, and I find it to be really powerful. So, so that's one thing, but also because of my quiet subversion, and because remember, the students were told, this is what they're gonna learn.
Right.
They were given like this huge workbook. I had to manage student expectations, and I had to be thoughtful and specific about how I managed those expectations. And I decided that part of being quietly subversive was also being honest with the students and not pretending to do something or pretending we were going to get to do something and then like run out of time. No, I decided to teach them and to educate them. So I started every class with a quote about language acquisition. When they joined my Zoom room, this is what they saw. And my intro every day would be something like this. I used a variety of quotes. we're doing a whole fun club about this, so I'm not going to park on it. When I introduced my norms for the class, I shared what I thought their job would be. Their job is to listen, have fun, ask me if they don't understand. And then I shared this. We're going to spend time using the language rather than talking about it. And that was very well received, because for many of them, they had the experience of studying a lot and doing a lot of grammar activities, but did not feel like they had made a connection between the grammar and the language. And I wanted to validate that using is different than talking about. And not to tell them they were doing anything wrong. Oh my goodness, no, never. But to say, in this class, we're going to take advantage of our time together and use what we can together.
Yeah, I think that educating stakeholders piece, Autumn, you said, that's so important. So, I think that sometimes the easier stakeholders to educate are students, parents, administrators. And then it's really colleagues that are also professionals and that have their own beliefs about language acquisition. Many of them that have not examined the facts, as you started out by saying, and some of whom have, but they're allowed to arrive at different conclusions. So I think it's so valuable that you stopped and you did this, so you got your students on board. And then I am seeing a couple questions just, so what about those other colleagues that, like, you say these things about language acquisition, like you tell them this is how language is acquired, and they're just like, nope.
You know what? We don't need to all believe in the same things. To me, that's the quiet subversion piece. I'm not telling them what to do. I'm choosing what I'm doing. And I think that's really important. I am not saying, oh my gosh, the next level teacher is a terrible teacher and you are going to be miserable up there and they don't know what the heck they're talking about. No, never. That is just plain unprofessional. Yeah. And yes, I have had it done to me and it's a terrible feeling, right? It's like so middle school. Instead, I choose to do what is meaningful for me and effective for the students, because I'm a professional. And just because the next level isn't there yet, they aren't on the same pedagogical train as I am, for whatever reason. Maybe they just had a baby and they just need the easiest thing possible. Maybe their mom is dying and that is where their energy is going, and they just need to pass out some packets. No judgment. I'm not here to judge them. I'm here to teach language to students. And I think that's really important.
Well, and I think showing too how you went through and highlighted the syllabus, that's a really valuable exercise for anybody that's having those hard or frustrating conversations with colleagues, to be able to go back and say, this is the syllabus, or like, even if you have your textbook, so you have the textbook that sits on a shelf in your room, pulling that out and photocopying the table of contents and saying, okay, so this is what the textbook is supposed to cover in level 1, and then highlighting, saying, this is when we this is when we covered this is when we covered that, this is when we covered that. Like, you are covering all of these things, just not in the same way that they are covering them, and
not necessarily in the same order. But I would say that I would be confident in, especially if I had a hand in designing like unit assessments or end of term assessments or department assessments, especially if I had a hand in designing proficiency-based assessments. Oh my goodness, I would feel really good about that. I would feel good about how my students could do. Now, if I have to give a very sort of grammar heavy final assessment, I might have to make some other choices and teach that test. Absolutely. I also want to talk about this because students have expectations about what language class is going to look like. And my computer's a little frozen. So at the end of the day, a couple days, I did this in the last minute of class. I said, so today, on page 7 of your workbook is the syllabus. These are all the things that we did. We used preterite imperfect, present, progressive, reflexive, verb stem, stem changing verbs, verbs with irregular yo form, Sarah star. We told a story and we learned more about each other and the world around us. And their eyes got really big. They were like, we did all of those things. And I'm like, we did.
Yeah.
And how do you feel? And they were like, we feel great. And that to me is the point. In a week, are they going to learn how to communicate with native speakers? No, that's ridiculous. Are they going to learn how to use Sarah and a star perfectly in a week? No, that is not a reasonable expectation.
Don't even get us started on order of acquisition.
I got some research for you on that. Are they going to want to go get more language and feel good about it and feel like they can do this? Well, isn't that better?
Yeah. Aren't they going to be excited to come back? Alicia, I love this. I didn't know that you did this. And I love that. I feel like this is such a good, maybe best practice for anyone who is in one of those tricky departments where other people have expectations, even just for students at the end of the day to say, hey, guys, oh my gosh, this is all the different kinds of language that we use today. And I mean, students are seeing those words, so when they hear their next teacher say preterite tense, it's not going to be completely unfamiliar, but really just as a sense of pride. And I've done things similar or said things like this before where I'm like, guys, this whole story was in the preterite tense and I didn't even start learning that. And I was in Spanish too. And you're in like the beginning of Spanish 1. Oh my word, you're amazing. So, mentioning it in that sense so that it's not stressful to students at all, but really the celebration of like, look at how smart and amazing you are.
The celebration. I mean, we also used the subjunctive a bunch and past subjunctive. And if you were Alicia's owls, what would you do? What would you have done instead of steal the keys? Like we used all of that kind of language. Because that wasn't on the syllabus, I didn't highlight it.
That's a story we need to hear.
And I think it's really like, to me, it felt like I needed to sort of close the loop on that.
Yeah.
But we're going to use these. We're not going to talk about them. And look, we did.
Yeah.
I felt like that.
That closing. I like that closing the loop. That terminology a lot. Looking for a writing utensil.
And here's the other piece that I think is really important is if I was in a different context, I might have done something different. So my first year at my last school, I went with the flow for like the first 6 months because I was really intimidated by the teacher. He wasn't even above me. I was the highest level teacher there, but like he had been there for like 6 years. I was super intimidated. I went with the flow and just did kind of what he told me. When I became the department head, guess what I did? And in between, I was quietly subversive. So depending on your context, your situation, your world, your comfort level, your time, like your season of life, maybe taking a stand is not the right thing if you are the sole breadwinner for your family, right? And maybe you don't need to lose your job over whether you teach the grammar syllabus or not. That is your call, right? Maybe you can be quietly subversive and use something like some of the ideas from this to stay true to you, to teach in a way that is effective and meaningful. Now, I see a lot of questions about the efficacy of teaching grammar. And I don't want to say I'm shutting you down on that, but we're kind of going to shut you down on that because that isn't really what we're talking about. Do you want to add to that, or Martina?
Yeah, so I think that, we're making this video from the perspective that, you have examined the facts, we have examined the facts. And so based on those facts, we have beliefs about how language is acquired. And we're not trying to convince anybody about how language is acquired in this video. We're saying if you share our same perspective on, how language competency should be built implicitly through acquisition-driven instruction, and you find yourselves in the department. So we have lots of other resources that we would love to point you to, that we talk about why we have arrived at the conclusions that we have. And we're happy to have those conversations too in the group, just not during this video. We're going to just stay on topic. But one thing, I'm also noticing a lot of blame and shame in the comments, self-blame and shame. And that is one of our norms, that you are not allowed to blame and shame yourself. But it is really, I mean, I want to acknowledge that it is really hard when you're sending your students on to somebody who has an expectation, that is going to be teaching explicitly, and you don't want to set your students up for failure. And so finding that balance of, like, Alicia, you said, if I was in a different context, I might have done it differently. And, each one of you watching, you have your own context, and we're not telling you to do exactly what Alicia did. We're trying to show, Alicia is trying to show her thought process, why she made the choices that she did. And the choices that you're going to make may be totally different, and that's okay. And there are going to be times where you're like, oh man, I maybe not even times, it may be that constant back and forth between, man, I really feel like I need to teach some grammar lessons to get them ready to go to the next level. But that means that I'm not using that time for meaningful acquisition. And, what's the right thing to do? And I think it's just finding that it's okay to be in that yuckiness. Like, don't let that get you down. It is a tricky situation to be in, and I don't know, there aren't easy solutions. So don't blame yourself for not finding a solution that feels perfect, or don't blame yourself for not finding a balance and being really confident about what you're doing, because it's really just a crappy situation, period.
Right. And thank you for saying that, because I also want to say that what I did in my previous classroom placement was totally different. And it was different between year 1 and year 5, right? Mm-hmm. And just in that placement, 100% of my students went on to very textbook centric, very grammar driven curricula. And it was a challenge to figure out how to manage that. It was surprisingly, once I figured it out, again, it went back to teaching the language and not teaching about the language for the bulk of my time. It worked out pretty well. Like, mm-hmm. And the other piece that I think is really important is that with this mindset, my students who thought they were dumb, my adult students who came with all of this baggage, who were like, I've been studying Spanish for 15 years and I'm like, I don't even think I belong in this class. Mm-hmm. They left saying things like, I feel like I could do a language exchange now. Mm. I feel like I could travel now. Like, they left feeling like they had met their goals. And I think that's really important, because people think that they're bad at languages. Yeah. They're not.
This Alicia, that just made me think of, so there's a school district that's adopting Somos for the coming year. And it's actually one of the school districts that I did my student teaching in. And the district that I began to realize what kind of a teacher I wanted to be, and how I wanted to teach language, even though I didn't know yet what I knew about CI. But it was a district. I had some very old seniors in a Spanish 1 class. So they were like kids that had been in high school for 5 years. They were already 18. They were in Spanish 1 because they had already failed it a whole bunch of times, and they were just not making any attempt to, like, they just came in, put their heads down. They had already given up because they'd already failed this so many times, and that was how it was going to be. And so being able to see I just wish that I could go back now, or, I'm thinking now this district, like those kids, obviously not the same students are in that district anymore, but those kids in that district, it's like me being able to go back and say, like, look, now I know the key. I know how to show you that you are as smart and as capable, like that, believe that all students are capable of acquiring a language. That is, one of our core beliefs here. And that's what we're showing students. And it is hard when colleagues don't believe the same thing. Like, there may even be people watching here that don't believe that all students are capable of learning another language. But to me, like, if I just keep coming back to that, all students are capable of acquiring language when it is taught in a way that is in line with language acquisition. That gives me the like motivation I need to keep pushing, even when there's a really nasty colleague that's like really giving me a hard time.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for saying that. So I'm seeing more questions. Our topic is really not about activities. It's not about output. It's not even about the value of teaching grammar, because again, what our beliefs are that we're going to spend time using the language rather than talking about it. So that is kind of our North Star in this case. This is certainly my North Star as a teacher in this particular content. We acquire spoken fluency not by practicing talking, but by understanding input, by listening and reading. And there's a lot of variations on this if you choose not to quote Dr. Krashen. There's many other researchers that show us this, and we are going to do a whole fun club on that. So stand by.
Yeah.
So with that, I've popped an amazing, some resources in the chats. We're headed up onto an hour. If you take one thing away from this session, it's that you deserve to teach in a way that is effective and meaningful, even if your colleagues don't agree with that. You deserve it. It does take courage and it takes intentionality. And I'm directly quoting Angela Watson. She kindly gave me permission to quote these because it does take courage. It takes intentionality. It takes decision-making. Students deserve to be learning in a way that you know to be effective. What you decide is effective is up to you. We definitely have ideas. That's my job as director of training, right? Is to share with those ideas. But more importantly, you and the students deserve to teach and learn in ways that are effective and meaningful.
It reminds me of something that so Glennon Doyle, she wrote You Can Do Hard Things, which I think that's the name of the book. I didn't read it, but I follow her on Instagram, and she was talking about something that I don't even completely agree with, but she says, whenever you're faced with like disappointing yourself or disappointing someone else, always choose to disappoint someone else. Like, don't disappoint yourself. And I don't agree with that in every situation, but in this case, this is what you're doing. You're choosing between disappointing your colleagues or disappointing yourself. You're choosing between what they believe about language acquisition and what you believe about language acquisition. And if you have done your research, if you do know your facts, and if you need help with that, let us know. We would be so happy to help you, to help guide you in finding information, because it can be, academia is hard. It can be very hard, difficult to navigate all of those things. But figure out what you do believe about language acquisition now, what facts that's based in, get confident in that. And then whatever they're going to do is on them. You don't teach for what they think is best, teach for what you know is best. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have conflict. Like you said, Alicia, it takes courage. It may take courage. It may take intentionality. Sometimes you have a great department and it's easy and no courage required, but yeah, choosing between them and you, and if you believe that you are right, then do you.
Absolutely. And I would add to that, definitely know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If you do choose to make a stand, which I think is valuable, absolutely, because people who make a stand are change makers, and goodness knows a lot of things in our schools need some changes, right? But we also do need to actually be able to back up, like not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. But again, as Martina said, I love talking about that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and also, Alicia, that brings me back to the, our norm with not blaming and shaming, because I was in a Zoom with, oh my gosh, Eric Herman, his acquisition classroom. Eric publishes a weekly kind of quick notes for language teachers. We should add that to the resource document as well. But he had a Zoom meeting for everyone who was a subscriber. And Diane Neubauer, who is an amazing Chinese teacher, and also a doctoral candidate, she said, one thing that's really hard for teachers is that, we can really blame ourselves for not knowing all of the research, but it takes time and work to find the research and to learn how to read research papers. So we're not telling you that you need to go out and get the equivalent of a second degree in second language acquisition research. That is a full-time job. You have a full-time job. What you can do is look for, I think they call them interfaces. So an interface between research and teaching. So we might be your interface. We might be someone who you look to get information about language teaching, but I would encourage you to find other people who are also making research comprehensible. Eric Herman is a great resource. Diane Neubauer. So look for people that are talking about language acquisition in a way that isn't so crazy and makes you feel like you're getting another degree, because you don't have to become that level of an expert on it. We're not saying that. So don't blame yourself for like, oh, I really need to learn more about language acquisition, but I have a life. That's okay.
Right. Absolutely. Sorry, I'm just typing something in the chat. Okay. Somebody wanted to know if we're going to talk about a Somos unit. This isn't about Somos. It's about staying true to you. So we are not, but our welcome to Somos challenge, our welcome to Somos addresses things like unit overviews and stuff like that. So you are welcome to take a look at that. The bit.ly is bit.ly, welcome to Somos, and I'm trying to type it in the chat and failing, so my apologies. And
capitalization does matter, so pay attention. Yes. Pay attention to that when you're typing it in. So Alicia's popping that in. That is a resource that we have. Alicia just put that together for teachers last week. We published it, I believe. Where everything on there is clickable, all of those red dots. And so it's just a launch pad that you can find a lot of information from about Somos, but there's also some good resources on there for those of you that aren't using Somos, that are just general resources about language acquisition and a comprehension-based approach to teaching. So hopefully that bit.ly will go in.
Barbara is curious to know if any practice opportunities are recommended. Again, that is a little outside the scope of this. And remember, one of our norms is to stay on topic, and we're trying to hold ourselves to that. But I will leave you with this. If we acquire spoken fluency, not by practicing, but by understanding input. So when this is a great question, when colleagues want us to cough up the research, can we ask them? We can ask them to cough up the research to back their approaches. I don't disagree, and I also don't encourage being combative, being kind of a combative human myself. I have learned that's not the best. Like, well, you show me yours and I'll show you mine. Yeah. To me, I would rather, and this is just my decision, I would rather say, awesome, I'm going to go teach. So with that, are there any other short questions that we can ask about this particular topic, about looking at a syllabus?
Yeah, and we do totally appreciate that, this opens up a whole can of worms. And we have so many resources, coming back to that interface word, we're totally happy to be an interface for you between, what there is known about second language acquisition. We can provide you with those resources. So please do, drop a question in the comments after the video is over, or, make another post, send us an email. We will check out that Launchpad for Somos. We will gladly share those resources for you, because it is really important to us that you feel confident with the choices that you're making in the classroom. And, you know, we don't want you to get in a situation where you're looking dumb in front of your colleagues because you're making these assertions and you can't back them up. You know, you are the professional, you can find that research, but we're happy to help you in that journey.
Absolutely. I see. So, you know, sometimes with the new Zoom and Facebook interface, sometimes the comments take a while. I posted it about 12 times. So hopefully, if you go back and scroll up in the chat or refresh your feed, you'll see it. It's in there. I promise.
Yeah. I'll also send it out in an email probably next week, because we'll get this video on YouTube and we'll send that all out together, the replay, and then also the resource documents. So with that, another fun club down. I don't know, are we doing a fun club next week because of IFLT?
Oh, no. We're very busy.
So we'll skip. Alicia and I are both doing the IFLT conference next week. If I believe registrations for that is closed, but if you're looking for open trainings right now, we do have the Somos Summer Challenge, which is free and gives you the opportunity to earn 1 graduate credit for cheap if you choose. If you don't want to pay to get the credit, you can still get PD hours for that. So feel free to check that out. We'll drop the link in the comments, or check your email. If you're a subscriber, we emailed that out. The less formal option would be the Welcome to Somos Launchpad. The CI Reboot Conference, it's a 3-part conference happening throughout the summer. It's run by Fluency Fast. The first portion of that conference was last week, and you can purchase the recorded sessions, and there's 2 more coming up. So that's another really good resource for any of you who are looking for more training this summer, but also, like, you guys need a summer. So if you want to do training, great. There's options, but don't blame and shame yourself for just enjoying your summer and resting and recovering. So
absolutely. Don't blame and shame. And also, if you do want information about the CI Reboot, I did a whole session and a half, 2 sessions, a session on explicit grammar teaching, and Eric Herman did, and Drs. Van Patten and Lichtman also weighed in on those topics with Dr. Printer. So good stuff. There's a lot there. So with that, we are saying farewell. Adios.
Toodaloo, guys. Until next time.
We'll see you in the comments. Bye.
Bye.